So yesterday we did BEDMAS. Today we're going to talk about substitution. It's the first time we're seeing letters, and we're not really doing any algebra yet. Substitution is a very fundamental idea and skill in math, and it's something that we are actually going to do a lot of. Like I said yesterday, how some of those complex, long BEDMAS questions, you're never actually going to see questions like that in this class. The BEDMAS will show up for sure here and there, but it's pretty straightforward, pretty simple idea of how we would do BEDMAS questions. It's kind of like the money questions that we looked at, right? But with substitution, it's a bit different. There will actually be a lot of substitution when we do area, volume, perimeter. That's all substitution because you have a formula and you're substituting values into the formula. When we do a lot of the linear relation stuff, Pythagorean theorem, like there's all kinds of places where we will use substitution. And so it's when I say it's a fundamental skill, what I mean is it's something that that you want to know it so well that you can use it in all kinds of different situations. So even in new situations, you can do some substitution, right? And you can kind of know how to do it. So I'm going to give you a sort of a step-by-step way of doing it. It's really simple. We're still just warming up, right? But, and for these questions, really, there isn't another way of doing it. There's sort of other ways that you could write it, but I would strongly encourage you to do it this way. And having steps like these is really helpful. If it's an easy question, you might not really think about the steps. Oh, I know how to do this. But if it's a harder question, or it's a new question, or it's a new way of using substitution, or a new idea, or it's a test and you're nervous, or something like that, having steps is a great way of breaking down a bigger problem and just remembering what to do. Because all you have to do is remember step one. You don't have to remember the whole thing. And once you remember step one and get to the end of it, you'll probably automatically remember step two. That's kind of how your memory works, like we were talking before, how the brain works. And so if you can get just step one, then you'll kind of remember what to do, okay? And it's not as overwhelming because step one is usually just a small part of it. It's not as overwhelming that you have to remember all this whole process of how to solve something, okay? And like I said, if you're ever stuck, if you can remember the steps, sometimes that can get you moving. So our steps are replace all variables, that should have an S on it, with brackets. Again, you don't have to write this down. Complete the substitution, and then you're going to notice it just looks like a question from yesterday. And most of these are pretty easy BEDMAS questions. Okay, so what often happens in mathematics is we have a formula or a statement, or sometimes we call it an expression. And so in this case, the first example we're looking at is 2a plus 3b. Okay, and then you have values for those variables, a and b in this case, or a, b, and c in all the examples that we're going to look at. So I want to take the values of those variables and put them in for the variables and solve it. What does 2a mean? Donovan, you kind of talked about this before, so I think you already know. Does anybody else have a guess of what 2a means? What do you think? Donovan, yeah?
I think it's
2 times 1, because a is 1. So 2 times a. What if we didn't know a was 1? But you're right, it is 1. It would mean 2 times a. That's what it means. And if you know, you might know a and you might not. Sometimes in math, we figure out what a is, and sometimes we don't. Okay, but it still means 2 times a. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write equals, and I'm going to do the steps, and I'm going to replace the a with brackets, and in this case, I'm just replacing them with empty brackets. So that's what I want you to do for the first step. And I'll give you a hint. In this class, we don't do this very much, but in grade 10, you will. We don't always put numbers in those brackets. Like math gets really hard, right? If you took math at university, or if you became a mathematician or something like that, or even took it in college, or even when you get to grade 11 or grade 12 in high school, math gets pretty complex. It's hard to imagine what it might look like. But sometimes we don't put a number in those brackets, we put something else. So this is what I'm talking about is, but not really in this course. But this is what I'm talking about is like just that first step of putting, well, I don't know what I'm going to put in the brackets, but I'm just going to put empty brackets. And then I'm going to think about what I put in them later. That can be a first step, and it's easy to do. Didn't really require any understanding or any thinking. That's all I did was replace the variables with brackets. Easy, right? I could teach my 4-year-old daughter to do that probably. Like she would be able to do that. It's an easy thing to do. Now the next step is put the values, the appropriate values into the bracket. So what should I put into the first bracket? Donovan already told us. The value for A, because it's coming from A. So we're going to put a 1 in there. And I know this is an easy question. We're really taking a long time and maybe overthinking it. But again, down the road, it might be helpful when you do something harder. So what am I going to put in the bracket for B? This bracket was an A. This bracket was a B. What's the value for B? It's 2. So we're going to put a 2 in that bracket. And so now what does this mean? It means 2 times 1 and 3 times 2. And it's BEDMAS, so we multiply before we add. So 2 times 1 is 2. 3 times 2 is 6. And 2 plus 6, I can do this part. It's 8. There's something in mathematics called the Millennium Prize problems. Okay? And there's maybe I'll bring it up later, but there's a Wikipedia page so you could read about it. And I think it was a mathematician. I don't know the name of the person who started it, or if it was a group, maybe it was a group. Anyway, what they decided to do is there's 7 problems that are unsolved and really hard. They're unsolved. Nobody in the world has solved them. But mathematicians believe that they're very important. So if they can be solved, it will mean a whole bunch of other things after them can also be solved and will be known. Things we don't know, we'll know. Okay, if we don't know if they're true or that kind of thing, we'll know. So there's 7 of them. And if you solve one of them, you get $1 million. Okay? So if you want to go home and try to solve one today, that'd be a good idea. But it's one of them actually was solved, and the guy was kind of kooky. He was a Russian guy, and he refused the money because he said, no, mathematics isn't about money. It's about doing what's right for the world. And kind of crazy, but anyway. So you get $1 million for solving one of these 7 prizes or math problems. Go and read them, and maybe I'll pull one up later. Like, you can't even understand what they're saying. I can't even understand what they're saying. Like, a couple of them I kind of know what it's talking about, but it's not like it's a hard BEDMAS problem. It's like you don't even understand what the question is talking about. It doesn't even seem like mathematics. So when I say mathematics gets complicated, it's like, I mean, it goes beyond anything I even understand, right? Like, I did a lot of mathematics in university, but there's a lot more out there and I haven't done that kind of mathematics in a long time. So, a lot of the stuff I used to do in university, I wouldn't be able to do now. Mathematics gets hard. Anyway, let's do the next one. What does A, B, C mean? It's not just the start of the alphabet. What do you think it's talking about? Savannah, what do you think? It does mean the numbers. So what? But even if I forget about the numbers, what does it mean in a mathematical sense? What did we just talk about? What do you think? Yeah, what do you think? We are going to replace them with brackets. And when I do, so let's do that. There's the A, there's the B, there's the C. Notice I didn't put anything in between the brackets. There was nothing between the variables, so I don't put anything between the brackets. Some people might try to put a plus sign or something between them. In a learning goal, and I'd be like, where did the plus signs come from? Where did you get these from? But you might think, well, I didn't know what to put between them. But notice there's nothing there. It was just ABC. Now it's just bracket, bracket, bracket beside each other. And what do brackets beside each other mean? Multiplying. So it meant A times B times C. That's what that expression means, right? It means A times B times C. If it meant A plus B plus C, it would say A plus B plus C. The plus signs would have been in there, just like we saw over here, okay? So now I can go ahead and put the values in. What's the value for A? It's 1. What's the value for B? The value for C? Nice. And I can do all of this in one step. When I'm doing multiplying and dividing, I don't have to do it one at a time. For BEDMAS, I can do it all together. And in fact, I think that's easier. You're less likely to make a mistake if you do all of those at the same time. So 1 times 2 times 3, 1 times 2 is 2 times 3 is 6, right? So this one should be 6. So far, pretty easy. Why don't you try the next one? Probably a bunch of you already, oh, it wasn't up there, so maybe you didn't know what it said, but I'm sure you can do it quickly. What's the first step? Do that. Then do the second step. All right, did you get this? And some of you probably are substituting, you're not like doing this, and that's fine. You're substituting as you go, that's okay, right? You did like 10 bracket, 1 bracket. Oh, wait, that's not right. What goes in the first one? What's the value for C? 3. So 10 bracket, 3 bracket. Like, that's fine to do. But remember, down the road, if you're doing a different kind of substitution, and you're subbing something different in, and you're not sure, that's when you can go back to the steps. Like sometimes you start to skip steps when you start to get good at things, but then when all of a sudden it gets harder, you go back and use all the steps. And that allows you to get through a new kind of problem or new kind of thinking, right? And then B is 2. So you don't have to like put the open brackets in first and then put the numbers in after. You don't have to do it in that order is what I'm saying. But it can be useful maybe to remember that might be a thing to try if you're stuck on a question. Okay, so what do? Multiply or subtract first? BEDMAS tells me I multiply first, so 10 times 3 is 30. 4 times 2 is 8. And how many people got 30 minus 8 is 22? Awesome. Okay, let's do a couple more. Ooh, what about when you have exponents? So I'm going to do the first one with you. Write the question down. I replace the A with brackets and I write everything else the same. So look at where I put the exponent. I put it on the bracket because the brackets replaced the A. The exponent was on the A, so it goes on that. You try to do the next part, plus. And then there's an exponent on that as well, squared on that as well. Some people might think the exponent is on the 2 as well and square that part, but you don't. It's just on the bracket. It's just on the A. I'm going to go ahead and put these in. So I think A was 1 and B was 2. Is that right? So now BEDMAS tells me brackets, but there's nothing to do inside the brackets, so I go on to the next letter, exponents. So we do exponents first, and I can do both exponents. What's 1 squared? Good. 1 times 1. So it's 1. And what's 2 squared? Good. You don't need the brackets there. I just put them in because why not? 2 times 1 is obviously 2 plus 4 is 6. Okay, go ahead and try the next one. All right, there we go. That was our first step, and A was 1, B was 2. And it's good to have those moments where, like, this, for some of us at least, probably seems really easy. And like we talked about this yesterday, made a joke about how, like, oh my gosh, this is too easy, and then it gets too hard, and people are like, oh my gosh, it gets too hard, right? But it's nice to start off slow, and we are taking it nice and slow right now. But then you have those moments where you're like, wait a minute, what do I do for this one, right? And even though it's not that different, you kind of get stuck. And it's good to realize that even if it seems easy, sometimes there's situations that for whatever reason just look a little bit different to you, and you're not really sure what to do, right? So what am I going to do in this case? I'm going to do the exponent first, and I'm going to write everything down just the way it was. So I'm not touching the 3, and I'm not touching the 1. And again, it's 2 squared, so that's 4. And I'm going to put that in brackets because it was times before. Some people would add in a plus here because they wouldn't know what to do, but that's wrong because this part here meant multiply, so it should say multiply still. So I just put the brackets side by side so that it still says multiply, and don't forget the minus 2 at the end. 3 times 1 times 4 is 12. Minus 2 is 10. Anybody get 10 already? Got that done? Awesome. Flying through this. I think this is our last one. Ooh, this one's tricky too because there's already brackets. And then we're going to use more brackets. So how are we going to write this? I'm going to help you with the first step, how you can write this. Again, there's different ways to do it, and you might do it a slightly different way or write it slightly different, and that's fine. We'll take a look at the learning goal tomorrow and give you some feedback if you're writing it differently, if that's okay. If you ever do it differently from, say, how I have modeled it or how we've talked about it in class, you got to make sure it's okay the way you're doing it. There might be a reason why what you're doing is wrong that you wouldn't know. Okay, and so it's fair that you're doing it your way. It might make sense to you, but it's actually not okay. So you get that feedback on learning goals, and if you're ever unsure, why did you mark this wrong? Then we'll have a conversation about it, and I'll tell you why. I'm happy to tell you why. Yeah. Let's just finish this example first, okay? So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take the brackets that are there, and I'm going to replace them with big square brackets. And what am I going to do with the B? Replace it with the little brackets, and the C with the little brackets. And then now I've got the big square bracket again, and I'm going to put the 2 on that. And that way I could just tell which brackets go with which. And once in a while, even in a class like this, this might happen. You might want square brackets, or you could use round brackets and just make them bigger too, right? Or you could use like triangle brackets. They wouldn't be triangle, but you know what I mean? Like straight brackets, something like that. You could make up your own if you want. But all right, and then this is pretty easy. So 2 and 3. And now I might rewrite this way. I don't know. The brackets inside the brackets, you don't really need them anymore. There's not really anything to do. I'm just adding those 2 numbers. So this is really a question like this, if we did it from yesterday. And the brackets are, what are the brackets telling me? In fact, a few of you were kind of asking about this on the learning goal. Go ahead, Donovan.
That's probably times them, like 2 times 2 and 2 times 2.
Well, what the brackets are telling me, what do I want to do first? Bed mass, right?
Yeah.
The exponent is on both of them, in other words, is what you're saying, which is correct. But before I use the exponent, let's do the adding first, and then we have to do it. So the 2, like you're right, it's not just on the 3, it's on both. But bed mass tells me if I want to be sure to get the right answer, I'm going to add first, so I'm going to do 5. And what's 5 squared? There's 2 possible answers that I could see people saying. And here's the 2 answers. Which one is it? What do you think? Why is it 25? You're right. By itself, not by the exponent. But we all know that a lot of people would automatically think 10, right? And sometimes your brain jumps to 10 because you think 5 times 2. Yes, what's the answer? Very nice. So 2 times 25, which is 50. Awesome. Great work. Any other questions about that?